this video, I'm going to show you how to make a candy themed wreath. I started with a greenery wreath form that I got from Hobby Lobby, and I really like this kind because it's soft, it's not scratchy at all, and it was still very pliable. So I went around and fluffed the entire outside of the wreath, not too much, but just enough. And then I took a 10-inch roll of red and white mesh, and I cut that into 20-inch long pieces. Now we're going to take this and actually put this into the greenery wreath. So I cut up the whole entire roll, and then I brought the greenery wreath back, and then I rolled this. I rolled in the edges on either side about 3 times a piece, and then I ruffled it up the center. So your fingers walk up the center, kind of scraping it, held it together, and then just twisted it into the wreath. So use those 2 green tines. You find a good location where they're close enough, and you can wrap that right in there. So you see, I ruffled up the second one, and now I put some on the outside and some on the inside. That way it makes sure that it's full all the way around. And I did that using the rest of the entire roll of mesh. Obviously, it did not go as fast as you see it sped up here, but it ended up filling it out really nicely. What this does is give the ribbon a nice background to hold on to, and then if you make any attachments, it really helps everything stay in there, but it adds a great pop of color as well. These greenery wreaths can be used year-round. They're fantastic. I had to use a second roll of mesh because I kind of ran out. So what I did then was I took some of the mesh I'd already cut, moved it around, and sprinkled in the different mesh here and there just to make it look more intentional. Both rolls were pretty close together though, so you couldn't really tell much of a difference once everything was in there and fluffed. And here is the finished wreath. Now we get to go starting decorating it. So here's the candy cane sign. This is an aluminum sign. It has 4 holes in each corner. So what I did was cut off the little jute rope that's on the back, pulled that out, and then I used chenille stems or pipe cleaners, and I used that. So I inserted it through the hole and just kind of twisted around each time, and I did that in each of the 4 corners. Once that was done, then I checked the placement. I wanted to put this angled going down the right side. I then took the pipe cleaner and I fed it through on all 4 sides. I fed it through the greenery part, and I wanted to make sure I caught the big ring. There's 2 rings that are around the back, so you want to make sure you catch at least one of those rings so that it stays in place. So I did that, all 4 of them. Sometimes you have to turn the wreath around and make sure that it comes through in the right place. But this went pretty smooth, and I was happy with the placement. Then it was time to make the bow. This is one of my favorite parts of making a wreath. I started this bow with a 4-inch red velvet with flocked edging, and I did dovetail it before I started. Now, the look I'm going for here is I don't want to just have tails. I want to have it cascading down from the bow above. So I was measuring to make sure that the tail I had, and then it would kind of go up toward where the bow was. I want to make sure I gave it enough length because I could always make it shorter, but I couldn't make it longer once I was done with it. So I put that in there, and then I did the pinch and twist. And that is the most important part of bow making. That way you see the back side of the bow of the ribbon, and then you flip it over and it comes across, and then you see the nice part on the top. And then you pinch and twist so that you see the back side of the bow again, and you bring the bow over through the bow making tool. And that way you always want to see the nice edge on the top. And then I dovetailed this here as well. It adds a really nice finish. And I left that tail long enough where it would be able to kind of bend backwards a little bit over the wreath. That way it kind of makes it feel more full, a little bit more grand. I then took a 4.5 red and white peppermint striped bow, also with flocked edging. And I'm doing the same here. Now this one, I was not going to have that long of a tail going down, so this tail was a bit shorter, which was fine. And this ribbon is pretty, but it was more of a nylon, so it was a bit more difficult to work with. I prefer a little stiffer ribbons because they stay more where you put them. This one, I put it in there, but then it kind of gets a little floppy sometimes, gets a little bit of a mind of its own, made it a bit difficult. So this one, you'll see that the ends of the loops come in a little bit before the layer below it. So that way nothing should ever cover completely the layer that's below it. It comes in a little bit each time with each different ribbon and each set of loops. So I did 2 loops of this one as well, and then I dovetailed a shorter end on the top. And there we go. Snip, snip. Okay. The next layer of ribbon I'm doing is white, and it has green and red peppermint on there. I wanted to make sure I had a touch of the green in the ribbon as well, because you can see on the candy cane sign it says 5 cents, and I wanted to pick up that green and some little touches, and this one was perfect. So this one, I'm making the loops about 5.5 inches because the bottom layer is 7 inches. The one above below it then is 6 inches, and then this one is about 5.5. This next layer uses a green bow with candy cane print, and I thought that went perfectly. So this one came in with loops that are about 5 inches. And the next layer is red with peppermint, but it also had this red chenille edging that is just beautiful. And this one came to 4.5, I think, on the loops that I did on this one. So you can see that they're progressively getting smaller the further that I get into the center of the bow. And then I used this gorgeous 1.5 inch ribbon. It is one of my favorites. I love to use this in the center of a lot of my bows because while it is narrow, the edging on there and just the thickness of the stripes, it makes a really nice, pretty center bow without making it look too small. And now we need to secure the bow. And sometimes this can be tricky because some of the bows have a lot of ribbon and you've got to hold it together pretty tightly. So I'm going to grab it and pinch down on it as I pull it up. Think of it as trying to hold together a really thick sandwich. Then I put the pipe cleaner behind the bow, tucked underneath my finger. And then I take the zip tie and I poke it through my 2 fingers in the back, and then I slip the top of it just under my thumb. It holds it in place as I bring the zip tie around the back, and then I can pull that. And you want to pull it so it's tight, but you still want to be able to move it around and work with it a little bit before you really strangle it and pull the life out of it. Because the tighter that you can make your zip tie, the more your loops are going to pop. So this is where I arrange it. I want my tails to come out toward the top, the longer tails on the bottom. And then you want to make sure that your zip tie gets snipped. You try not to leave anything sharp on the back of that. Now that the bow is made, the fun part is getting to put that on the wreath. So there are pipe cleaners on the back. I'm going to twist those just to make sure it doesn't slip out through the zip tie. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the sign. You want to feed the back 2 ends of those pipe cleaners, right? It's 1 pipe cleaner bent in half. You want to push that through the back of the wreath. You want to make sure that you catch one of those metal rings. Now, some of these wreaths have 1 ring. Some of these wreaths have 2 rings. This one has 2. And if you want your bow up a little higher, you can put it on the bottom largest ring. If you want your bow a little bit more toward the center, then you would put it in the ring that is smaller and more on the inside. Now I want to take that long red tail and then I pinch it. Make sure I've got enough give in there where it doesn't look choked. It should look like it's cascading down. And then you'll take that and pinch it in between those tines just like you did when you were stuffing the mesh into it. And you can even open sometimes some of the same exact place where you open it up to put in the mesh is where you can open it and put the ribbon in there. And then have that end come down so it looks like it's cascading down. And then rearrange the other ribbons all around it. That's what I did, and it turned out pretty well. I really like the slight, subtle pops of green in there. It's definitely got green in there, but it's not overpowering. Then it was time to look at the placement of the candies. So I held them up to make sure I liked where it was going to go. And then I used some floral wire, and I wrapped that around the bottom of the bow. I use that so I can hold it in place. I am going to use some hot glue later on once I like the placement. This was kind of just something temporary and also to give it just a little bit of extra bracing. And I got to tell you, I struggled with this one for a really long time. It was not getting along with me, but I kept my patience. There we go. The bottom one went in a lot easier. So I used a green pipe cleaner and I wrapped it around the top, and then I fed that through the back of the wreath. And I was able to wrap that around the wreath ring in the back, adjusted the height and the length of it to make sure it fit properly, and then finished winding it around the back. There, that looks good. I also had an ice cream cone that I thought would be perfect with it. The colors were great with the red and the green. So I added a pipe cleaner to that, and then I fed that through the same way I did with the other ones. Kind of played with it a lot, fed it around back. I wanted to make sure I didn't cover it too much or bury it in there. Then it was time to add in some more ribbons. You didn't think we were done with the ribbon yet, did you? So I cut a dovetail piece and I added it into the top, and I created these cascades down. So it has some movement, has some volume to it, but it's not too tight, not too loopy. And I poked that in there in the green tines, just like I'd done with the mesh. And then I dovetailed the end. I then cut a piece of the green peppermint, 14-inch long, dovetailed it and added up to the top. Then I cut a piece of the white with the peppermint, and I did the same. This one was a little bit smaller, I'd say about 12 inches. And I tucked that one into the side. I then took the red ribbon and cut about a 20-inch length, dovetailed one end. The other end I pinched down to kind of create a loop. So it's got a little bit of a small loopy mini bow. And I attached that up there so it's just one tail and one loop. That kind of came out of the top right behind the sucker. I took the 1/2-inch peppermint ribbon and cut 24 inches long, and then I looped it together so it created another small little mini loop with the 2 tails sticking out that I then separated, and this covered the green tines. I then added more tails using the red ribbon. I added 2 sets of those. I like to make sure that different pops of color are spread out equally so that there isn't too much concentrated in one area. And then I also used the hot glue gun to secure the sucker into place. Then it was time to add in the foam candies. I've been holding out of these for almost a year and a half. So I used some hot glue and pushed that against the green pine tines as well as a little bit against the ribbon just to give it some extra security. A little fluff, and there we go. I continued adding more ribbon tails over on the left side of the wreath. I wanted to make sure that it's equally balanced and that the same type of patterns are spread at the same equal distance throughout. And again, the different lengths of the tails differ based on how deep I'm packing it into the wreath and how far I want it to stick out. And now it's time to add a second green candy at the 7 o'clock position. I played around with what would look best, and then I hot glued, put the glue, once I got another glue stick, put the glue on the back of that, decided where I was going to hold it. I wanted to make sure that the sides, the little handles of the candy wrapper, were not sticking out in a strange place. So it took me a bit to figure out how I wanted it, but then I put the glue on there, and then I pushed it into the pine tines, and then a little bit also on the ribbon, again, for added security. I added in another little dash of glue, held that in there, made sure it was totally secure, and then secured the other ornament as well. And then I glued on one more, because everything works well when it's put in groups of 3. That's a little design tip. And here's the finished product. It's cute, it's colorful, and it's ready for Christmas. Thanks for watching. You can follow me on TikTok and Facebook, and you can see my available creations at sweetariadecor.com. Merry Christmas!